60 years ago, on the 25th of March 1957, the leaders of 6 different countries came here to Rome to sign a treaty. That treaty established the European Economic Community, the basis of the EU today. And while 6 decades on, the EU has grown, one member, the UK, has now decided to leave. And the number of anti-EU political parties is on the rise across the bloc. So, is this the beginning of the end, or is there really something to celebrate as we mark this anniversary? In this edition, we're going to be meeting with some of the grandchildren of the men who signed that text to see how they feel the EU has changed their lives, for better or for worse. And indeed, we'll be looking at the impact the EU is having on many of the issues here in Italy, notably when it comes to migration or the economy. We're going to start in the hallowed halls where the leaders of 6 different countries came to sign that text, which is still today considered the founding text of the EU. I'm joined by Italy's Europe Minister, Mr. Sandro Gozi. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Tell me, Mr. Gozi, do you think that the EU we have today is what those men imagined when they came here to sign that text?
It's probably what they thought, because Europe today is a big space of peace, of rule of law, of some fundamental rights. It's probably not what they hoped, because I think that they hope that at this stage we would have a much stronger, better Europe, a much more politically integrated, and much more focused also on the real expectation of the citizens. More social Europe, more securities.
Now, I believe you feel that this 60th anniversary is a chance to relaunch Europe, but a lot of the argument is whether we need more Europe or less Europe, more integration or less.
Well, any politician in Europe would answer to you, we need a better Europe. The problem is that we don't know what better Europe means. So I will tell you what, for us, for the Italian government, a better Europe means. A better Europe is a Europe that provides today more safeties, more securities and more protection to fight against Europe of fear. We must build a Europe of defense, military defense. We must give economic security to our citizens, more growth and more investment policy. We must fight against social inequalities.
But a lot of those elements, the security, the economy, there's a lot of countries in the EU that don't want that. They want more power back to their national governments. So that's not going to be really very possible, is it?
It is a wrong solution to a real problem. The real problem that the Europe must get out of the status quo. The problem that if you go back to the past, if we return to the past, if we close ourselves within national borders, we would only worsen our situation. And the answer is let's do better and more together to tackle the big challenges that we have ahead of us.
Is the solution, what we're hearing more, a two-speed Europe where some countries go for more integration, but then again you have Poland saying, well, that's the liquidation of the EU ideal?
No, it has always been like that. Europe has always worked thanks to the stronger political will of a group of countries. After all, 60 years ago, there were 6 leaders, as you just recalled. There could have been more leaders at the time. If those 6 leaders had to wait for everybody, today, in these days, we wouldn't have celebrated anything at all.
Okay, well, we've actually been catching up with some of the grandchildren of the leaders that signed that text 60 years ago to see what they think about the EU today and what it's done for their lives.
On March 25th, 1957, the signatures of these men sealed the destiny of Europe as we know it today. They were Europe's founding fathers, and for their own grandchildren, the European dream still looms large.
My grandfather, Maurice IV, is sat next to Adenauer. He was the youngest signatory of the Treaty of Rome. He was 35 years old. I think he was carried by the post-war energy, which pushed them to reach a deal through negotiations.
For my grandfather, Benvenuti, the Treaty of Rome was, it has to be said, a compromise, in that for him, the real goal was to build a political union. For us, our grandfather was there during this historic phase. It's taken on a mythical status.
When I was a child, I wasn't told much about my grandfather. I knew that he had been an important figure and that he'd been the president of Italy. It was only when I was studying European law that I discovered that he had signed the Treaty of Rome. That was a great surprise for me.
My grandfather was Prime Minister of Belgium as well as Foreign Minister. Throughout his life, he believed passionately in Europe. He taught us about the love of a vision for Europe, the idea of peace between a whole host of different peoples, nations that have been fighting amongst themselves for centuries, and now there was peace.
3 generations on, Europe has been at the heart of all of their lives. Ludovico Benvenuti spends his working days at the European Parliament.
I know this place well. I spend a lot of time here.
This descendant of the Italian signatory is now a lobbyist. Working in Brussels means he's close to where the major decisions are made.
I'm an official lobbyist. The advantage of Europe is that it is totally transparent. In my case, when I meet with an MP or a European civil servant, it's immediately made public on the Commission's website.
In Rome, Laura Segni has also seen her career dominated by European affairs.
I worked in the Italian Ministry of the Economy. I took part in many European talks, and I've negotiated lots of European rulings for Italy.
But one descendant faces a very European problem. The grandson of the Belgian signatory, whose father was British, could lose his European passport because of Brexit.
It's entirely possible that I lose my European citizenship. That would make me very upset. Honestly, I'm glad my father never saw Brexit. It would have killed him, and my grandfather would have been appalled.
60 years on, for all the Treaty of Rome has achieved, the Europe of 2017 has failed in many ways to live up to their grandfather's hopes.
We need to move forwards. We need to move in Europe towards a greater political union. That's not a utopian ideal, it's simply pragmatism. We can't miss this opportunity to make Europe more democratic.
We have to be realistic. Today it's impossible. No one wants a common European defense force. No one wants shared debt. No one wants a shared legal system. The political conditions for that are not present today.
The European Union faces challenges from within and without. For these committed pro-Europeans, the clearest threat comes from the rise of populist politicians.
I'm terrified of Trump and of Marine Le Pen here in Europe. The UK's Nigel Farage is just a joke. He scares me less. I'm losing my status. My grandfather would be very sad. We are spoiling it. We haven't destroyed it yet. I refuse to let that happen.
I don't think the flame has been extinguished, but we have to be very careful not to let it go out.
60 years on from its birth, the future of the EU is far from certain. For the next generation, the ideals of the founding fathers may need to be updated to better suit the 21st century.
Mr. Gozi, we were seeing there one of the grandsons of one of those leaders that signed the text is actually going to lose his EU nationality because of the Brexit. You have in the past said that the Brexit is the beginning of the disintegration of the EU. Indeed, we're seeing anti-EU parties grow across the bloc. Is it not in some ways the beginning of the end?
If we remain in the status quo, it is sure. It is clear that Europe, on many ways today, is not working, and is getting far and far from your citizens' lives. So we must absolutely give a new boost to European integration. Then Brexit. Brexit is a choice that we have to respect, but it is not an opportunity.
Now, of course, the text that was signed, those 6 decades ago, really focused on economic cooperation. That was the focus of the text. Is that still for you the EU's main goal today? It's more about the economy?
It is a lot about economy today. We hope that it will be more and more about democracy, about social union, about the rule of law.
When you look, however, at the economy, Italy's economy really struggling of late. I believe the debt is now reaching a record 133% of GDP, not bringing it in line with the EU rules and coming under fire from Brussels. Is the EU being too harsh on Italy?
The public debt for the first time is going to be stabilized this year. We are going to reduce the deficit. It is clear that we want to pursue our dialogue with the European Commission. I think that there has been an over-dramatization of this negotiation, which is part of the game, part of the rules. I'm sure that we won't do anything that can affect the growth, which is still too low in Italy, but finally it has come back to 1% growth.
Well, indeed, in the second half of the show, we're going to be meeting an MEP from the Five Star Movement, the Italian party that really wants to hold a referendum on the euro, blaming the euro for much of the Italian economic crisis. Do you think that that is partly to blame?
No, I don't think. I think that the euro has been a very positive choice for Europe and for Italy. I think that according to a cost-benefit analysis, the benefits are still much higher than the cost for Italy in belonging to the euro. What is wrong is what is missing. We got a set of rules which are obsolete, which are inadequate after the crisis, and we must change the rules, and we must develop a truly economic policy at the European level. I hope, as it will be also after election in one big country at the center of Europe, I hope that finally also in that big country we can have an open discussion on how to strengthen the governance of the euro.
That big country being Germany, perhaps? A lot of people say, their surplus is too high in a way. They're not spending enough, and that's hampering the rest of the EU?
Total imbalance, and they cannot go on like that, because it is clear that they have started, but they have continued to boost their internal demand, to boost their internal purchasing power. They cannot rely only on export toward the rest of the world or toward the rest of the Eurozone. And we have to do our part. We have to continue with the structural reforms. We have wasted too much time in Italy, and we have to speed up. We must continue with fiscal consolidation. We are doing our part, and we hope the Germans will do theirs.
But overall optimistic for the future, Mr. Sandro Gozi. Thanks.
As they used to say here 60 years ago, I'm neither optimistic nor pessimistic. I'm very determined.